Oh my God. Oh, I can't even believe why I'm giggling. I don't even know why well, I know why I'm going to giggle because I'm going to say the title of this book. And the whole reason why I want to meet this author is because of the title of her book. And I am so grateful that she's straight up with her languaging in the title. And the title is Feel, Heal, and Let That Shit Go.
Woo!
Your guide to emotional resilience and lasting self-love. I want to welcome Rachel Kaplan. Rachel, thank you so much and that's the truth. That is the truth. When I saw the title, I was like, well, of course, I don't even know what the book's about, but I got to talk to this person. So I
Well,
love this.
I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you guys, this is a brand new work that Rachel's done. And as I've been perusing okay, so Rachel, I thought about 3 people I'm going to send your book to.
Awesome.
In fact, one was a sorority sister I was talking to last night, and she's like, my therapist really thinks I need to, like talk to my inner child. I'm like, oh, I got a book for you.
Nice.
So,
That's awesome.
yeah. So let's talk about what led you to do this body of work.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about the wounding pieces. I just love the way you've built the whole book. And you guys, it's juicy. This book is juicy. That's the best word I can come up with.
I love
So
it.
what led you to this, Rachel?
Yeah. Like many great companions on the healing path, for me, this seed was in trauma. So my first love and first huge attachment, of course, I had attachment to my parents as all babies and children do, but the first person I was like, I want to be as close to you as possible, took his life when we were both 14. And so I went on a journey of becoming absolutely dead inside, numb, really moving into my very active brain. And then once I realized just how much hollowness I had within and how much no life would thrive over this like hole inside, I started therapy as a 16-year-old and had my first huge healing around 18.
Mm,
Knew I wanted to be a therapist, a healing companion at that point. But what I think really is at the heart of this book and this body of work is it took me till I was 37 to actually get to a place where I felt like my baseline was self-love and enoughness and emotional resilience. And I had already been a therapist for a decade at that point.
right.
So really this book is like the absolute necessary pieces that make the difference between someone who's hobbling around compensating for their emotional wounds with someone who's really like broken through and has that well-being as the baseline, because I didn't want it to take everyone as long as it took me.
Okay.
And
So first of all, Rachel, I just got to say, congratulations. You got there much earlier in your state with more trauma than I've experienced, and most people,
yeah.
because it wasn't until I was 55
Yeah.
when I really began to realize I was bereft of any self-love and
Wow. Yeah.
respect and
Yeah.
things like that. So congratulations.
Yeah.
And I know it was an arduous
Yeah.
journey.
It was. Yeah, I mean, and I think the funny thing or the ironic thing is that I was already leading people pretty skillfully for a long time in their healing, but I think there's such a difference between feeling unshakably well and, looking okay, and I think
Right.
most people really I think there's just tremendous lack of understanding in the therapy world, in the spiritual world. And I think most people at best are managing a part of them that feels really unlovable. And it's almost like the approach I think is in some way counterintuitive, but in some way so obvious, so organic, hence the poop metaphor, which we'll get into, I'm sure. But I just really
Yeah.
want to be a stand for that because I received very useful help that I don't think most people do. It wasn't in the therapeutic world that I got my help. So,
Where did you get your help from then?
well, I talk about him quite privately. He's in all over the book, but I did like a 4-year healing mentorship with someone who was initiated into an Apache lineage. Someone who was working with primitive earth skills and emotional release work, which is a big component of the book. But someone who was really, an inch away from my nose, showing me my wounding and my injuries and not letting me blame anyone. I mean, I was in a kind of dysfunctional marriage, mechanically unsound marriage during that mentorship. That's why I worked with him so intensely. And through that work and through how much I was trying to save this marriage, I really had this pretty profound breakthrough, which, a year after that breakthrough, that's when I was like, oh my God, I have to share this. So I've been kind of relentlessly working on that since, which
I
is about
love that.
15. Yeah.
And we just bless that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, and his lineage, because that's profound.
Yeah.
Um,
Helpful.
so Rachel, you talk about wounding, and your first, well, probably not the first, but that big trauma, it actually happened to my niece as well, and it took
Mhm.
her a very long time uh to get healthy enough to have a healthy relationship
Yeah.
afterwards. But
Absolutely.
so so in your book, and let's go into the poop metaphor, because
Great.
it's really, I love the way you use it. And you talk about our wounds begin in childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those are two slightly different things, just to bring your listeners into the poop thing. All right, everybody. So when you have the urge, let's say maybe this morning or last night, depending on your system, when you got that signal from your guts that you needed to go to the bathroom, um, to poop, what did you do? Did you eat or drink or post something or buy a new outfit? What did you do to try to get rid of that feeling? I'm guessing everyone went to the bathroom and
Good
dropped
care
a
of
date.
business.
Yeah. I've learned in all this years of talking about poop that we say we take a poop, but actually we leave it. But anyway, we all went to poop when we had to poop. I mean, maybe it took you a minute. I've learned that some of you don't have an easy time pooping. I'm so sorry for that. But we were trained, we were potty trained. So as children, um, and we'll get to the wounding aspect of being children, we were taught that the only way to not have the sensation of needing to poop is to poop. And unfortunately, emotions are incredibly similar. They're also really intense clusters of sensations that signal something to us, but no one really taught us how to work with those. And so for most of us, not only do we lack the tools or the training on how to let your feelings flow through your body like poops, but we were actually in subtly and not so subtle ways conditioned out of our feelings. And so for
Uh-huh.
most people listening to this show, you probably eat something, smoke something, drink something, buy something, distract yourself. And the problem is that none of it actually shifts the feeling. It layers the feeling. It, temporarily mutes the feeling, but deep down we're still full of shit,
Mhm.
emotionally, and we're still full of pain. And eventually, after a certain amount of years and decades, lifetimes of not feeling our pain, we would be as sick as we would be if we never pooped. You can't live in the world, be a human, have relationships, have loss without eventually letting your body feel and still be healthy. And I've just found, as far as why this metaphor, there's something immediately illuminating about it.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
know, we know that we all poop. We know how to deal with it. If I say, deal with your feelings like you deal with your poops, okay, I need to let it move through you. And then there's this really precious bridge or connection around shame. Like most of us are semi private about our poop. We're not going to show our friends our poop. We're not hopefully inviting everyone into the bathroom to poop with us. And it's really important because I think most of us feel more shame about the part of us that feels like shit. And so using that bridge, using that lighthearted invitation to say, look, I know you feel bad. It's impossible to be a human without having some of these bad feelings, um, is also really helpful just as far as dismantling some of this shame as a culture that we carry around emotional wounding.
Yeah, yeah.
And it really goes on and on how parallel. It's like we don't dig through our poop. We're not like, well, what's in that poop? It's like at the end of the day, you don't actually need to know exactly why, quote unquote, you're having a feeling. In fact, that question just sends people into their heads, which is
Yes.
our a desire to escape the feeling. You just need to know, I gotta get this feeling out, and that's
Right.
how we relate to our poop. It's like it's really a stunning, endlessly effective metaphor that I love.
It really is. And you know, you the when you said when you start asking questions of why do I feel this way, and people go into their heads, that's another way of avoidance, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a subtle way of shooting quote unquote out of our feelings. Like if I said to you, after this call, Susan, I'm going to go to work, you wouldn't be like, why? But if I said, I'm mad at my sister, you might say, why? We only usually ask why when there's a subtle implication that something shouldn't be happening. And just
Uh-huh.
real quick tip for the listeners, ask how. Like, how am I feeling angry? How do I know
How?
I'm feeling angry? It immediately brings you into kind of the body-based, phenomenological experience of what you're feeling. You get curious, but you don't go heady on it. And you don't tell yourself you shouldn't.
Okay, my brain just went, cut. I'm
That's
like, I don't
right.
even understand that, Rachel. I'm gonna have to sit with that
Yeah, you
because
said, I'm
from
sad.
the time I was little, I've always asked why.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, and my first big video that got like, traction on social media was saying, don't ask why. And a lot of people said, well, don't we need to understand our wounding? And to an extent we do. And actually the place in the book where I say, hey, this is the one place I really want you to think about this is in the area you were just talking about childhood wounding. And we can get into that. But in general, in the moment when you're trying to feel your feelings, thinking is the exact opposite. It's about dropping into sensation that you're giving permission to do its thing. And so, the time to reflect on a pattern or the origin story of a wound is not when you're trying to feel the pain. It just doesn't work. And think
No,
about how many people who have elaborate, beautiful, nuanced stories of their wounding, and they're acting out the same bullshit every day because it doesn't having a story about why we are how we are doesn't actually help us change or heal.
no. When I was going through divorce, Rachel, several years ago now, I can say it's that far back. I remember I was invited to a dinner with other women who had gone through divorce.
Right?
And some of them, they were 12 years out or 18 years out. And almost every person at that table I was observing had a bitterness story that they were
Mhm.
still running. And I thought, I do not want to be that person.
Yeah.
And so consequently, I continue to work on, myself and my inner well-being so that I'm not constantly puking out a bitterness story,
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's like you probably need to grieve more. It's like
Yeah,
to feel the pain of the loss of a marriage. It's a big deal. And especially for people who don't have choice around it, if it wasn't their choice. But yeah, if we don't heal all the way, then the hurts just come out in all kinds of ways. And what you just said, puking out, it's like another great way to talk about shit. It's like if you don't let it flow, if you don't clear yourself out, you're going to be throwing your shit on everyone, even if
right,
it's just like through a bad attitude.
right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's when I said it's counterintuitive, it would be surprising that feeling your pain more would actually get you to the place where there's more love and less bitterness. Because we associate, well, if someone's really in their pain, maybe they're going to be in a bad mood or unhappy. But I find it's the people who know how to move their feelings through and grieve and even get ragefully angry, but in an appropriate way. Those are the people that are delights to be around.
Yeah, because they're cleaning up their shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're
It's
clear, they're present, they're not holding all this backlog.
right. And with a dialogue that's running at the back of the head of, oh my God, if these people find out what's really going on with me and all that stuff, then
Yeah,
they're not going to like me. Can I read something from your book?
absolutely.
Feel, heal, and let that shit go, you guys. So I got chills. I got chills, Rachel. Wow. Woo.
This is
Um,
your first moment, by the way. I just want you to know this is a special moment. No one's read to me in this context from the book yet. So I'm like, whoa.
oh, I love that. I get to be your first.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is in your chapter, how did we get so wounded?
Yeah.
The how, you guys. So what you say is tucking away our secret parts actually makes us feel less presentable, even more terrified. Because if those parts were to be discovered, we would be shunned, thrown off the island. Oh my God, I felt that the whole time.
Mhm.
Once we shove them, our feelings in the closet. We walk back up the stairs and shake the experience off like it never happened. Then we pray. I love this. We pray that these parts don't ever get discovered, don't make us lose love. This is the origin of our core wounds. How we feel loved for who we are. How can we feel loved for who we are when multiple parts of us are stashed away in a dank basement closet?
Yeah.
I got to tell you, when I read that, Rachel, I was like, oh my God, that was me. That was me. That was literally what I was uncovering when I was going through my divorce, because I had stuffed from childhood so much rage, so much anger, so much hurt, right? And then because the ultimate betrayal, trauma, whatever was happening in my life, I had nowhere to go but to go within, which is my practice anyway. But I really had to go down to that dank basement and open the door and see what was in there. And ultimately for me, processing the emotions that were pouring out of that basement closet was huge. But then I also, because I had the courage to open the door, I recognized that the stuff I thought that was hiding in there was not so bad.
No, they're not the little ghouls and gremlins we think they are. Yeah, that's so beautiful. I mean, at the heart of it, it's like when we're tiny babies, we need love to survive. And we're ultimately animals who know that. And so we are willing to do whatever it takes to keep that love and the care close. And for most people, it involves pushing these parts of us out. And that's in the best case scenario. Even if it's just your mom gets glassy eyed when you cry, or your dad tells you you're too sensitive. I mean, of course, it gets way worse with more emotional neglect or abuse. But so, we very skillfully push these parts down. And if we're not getting our needs met, we also skillfully, in the beginning, think it's our fault, which is why everyone's positive that, they're bad or they're not good enough.
Right.
Because to recognize that you're actually, as a kid, you're innocent and vulnerable, and the people causing you pain are at fault is way scarier. Does that make sense? It's like being helpless and dependent is scarier than feeling like maybe I should do better. Maybe if I clean my room more, maybe if I, don't cry so much, it's like that gives us this illusion of control. And so everyone we know, I'm not shocked that you were feeling it. I felt it. We all have different parts in there in the closet, what we thought made us good or bad. And this is the one place, like I said, in my map where I think reflecting on what did your parents value? Like, how did you feel you compared to your siblings? These are some interesting ways to uncover what parts of you might have stashed down there. And then, of course, it's not just the parents. Eventually, it's the middle school friends and the teachers. And now for kids these days, social media and all of it. And so, not that we need to know exactly who's in the closet, but it's like, it's helpful to know, who are you inviting back in? What did you imagine would make you unlovable? And what if that part goes from being the scapegoat and the secret to your VIP, who you're going to need to court back? It's not a given. These parts of us, by the time you're 50s, 30s, whatever it is, even, younger, I think luckily people are turning on to this healing work younger. By the time, we think to go down into the basement and knock on the closet door, we have been the ones repressing for usually decades. And so it's about reestablishing trust. It wasn't just our parents. We kept doing what they taught us to do and what society taught us to do. So the first wing of emotional potty training, as I call it, by the way, I did want to make that my title, but the publishing industry said, no, little girl, we don't, not like I'm little, but I feel little. We don't talk about poop. And I was like, oh, we don't? Okay. But anyway.
Watch me.
Yeah. I toned it down, which I think was appropriate, but it's still in there. So emotional potty training, which is kind of my lighthearted way to name this path, has two wings. And the first wing is really about this part reintegration. And the reason is, how are you going to feel the pain and release the pain that you carry if you don't have access to those parts? And most of us literally are severed from them. And so the first wing is finding inviting, caring. That's the key word, caring for those parts. So they slowly come back online. And then once they do, they're like, "Meh," they're in terrible pain. And then it's like learning how to help them have one movement at a time, how to release the pain they're carrying. And then you come into more who you really are, because those parts are actually some of our most precious, unique, interesting,
Yeah.
quirky parts. And you release, like, the backlog of all of these decades of unprocessed emotional shit. So that's the ticket.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you guys, it's in my experience, because I didn't do it the way you're describing, Rachel, I was so tied up.
Mhm.
I was so bound um, that I didn't even know I was enraged,
Mhm.
you
Yep.
know, and so it came out physically. I had hives for a year
Wow.
nonstop. You know, it just came out physically. When I would see my ex, soon to be ex, I would get dizzy just because that was all rage that I didn't even know it was rage. So now when I get dizzy or I get a little itchy, wait, that's happening. What was I just thinking? Who did I just interact with? What needs to be cleared?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'd say I'm angry. Okay, we're going to release the anger, however you do that.
Yeah.
So give our listeners what are the best ways to move? Oh, I have another quote first. What are
Okay.
the best ways for or skill sets we can develop to release our emotions or get them
Yeah.
flowing? But
Yeah.
let me read this because this is in How to Move Your Feelings Through Your Body chapter. Um, the biggest challenge that lies ahead is in the numbness and disconnection. That's what I was going through. That results from decades of intentionally avoiding and disassociating from emotions. Your defense mechanisms worked.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
that's
how
an
do
interesting
we
quote to
undo those?
Yeah, it's an interesting quote to start with, because most people are afraid that if they start feeling, they're never going to stop feeling, that they'll be swallowed by their feelings. And occasionally there's a situation of overfeeling, which I address in the book. But for the most part, it's the exact opposite, where we're so numb that it actually takes a lot of skill and kind of muscle building to be able to sustain connection to the emotions. And so I say that in the beginning just to soothe anyone who's scared of opening this door, that likely you will have hard feelings, but and you'll have hard feelings before you have the feelings you're trying to have, but it will probably be like, I can't do it, I'm numb, and that's okay, and that can be a doorway into the deeper feelings, because for most of us we feel like a failure. And so if you're trying to have your feelings all of a sudden and you can't, well, look, that's your feeling of being a failure. What's it like in your body to be like, look, I can't do this either? So to talk about emotions in a succinct way, there's one chapter on anger, one on sadness, one on fear, and one on shame, and one on happiness.
Love
So
it.
we get into detail in the book, but succinctly for today, it's really it's about energy moving, and there's two main ways that energy moves emotionally, and one is an explosion, kind of up and out. Think anger for that, some forms of fear. And the other is an implosion. And that's like the heavy, downward, achy, collapsing feeling of grief, of some forms of fear, shame. And so in the beginning, what I teach is like learning the basics of anger and sadness. Like, how do you explode and how do you collapse? And they're very different, right?
Right.
So if your example of being angry toward your ex, it's like, if you notice that your body is showing you signs of anger, and by the way, of course it is, these are incredibly physical. Anger the most in a way, but our emotions are not, they're not something happening separate of our bodies. That's why the poop metaphor makes sense. Like,
Mhm.
it is our bodies, and people will get disastrously ill if this system can't come into balance. And luckily that usually brings people to their healing path, so it's fine. But it doesn't have to be so uncomfortable. So with anger, let's say, anger is a feeling where it's really physical. You want to be careful not to hurt yourself. And obviously, people have different ranges of mobility and ability to physicalize. But it could be anything from venting verbally, screaming, wringing a pillow out. Those are some lower kind of physical demanding experiences. To, the most extreme one that's in the book is chopping wood with an axe, or simulated chopping where you take a towel and hit a bed. But it's basically, anger work is something you could do in the day when you're busy, when you're caffeinated. It doesn't require the same slowing down that grief, let's say, does. But it's about like situating yourself to have a private experience. With anger, I think one of the keys is it's about, if you think of, and I equate each of the emotions to an element, and that was directly from my mentor, who is really earth based. He actually says that the emotions are built of the elements in our
Mhm,
bodies.
mhm.
But what element do you think correlates with anger?
Hold on. Fire.
Yep. Yeah. So fire. Now, fire is disastrously dangerous, destructive, like, takes out of town if it wants to, right? But we still work with it. We cook our food with it. We use electricity. If we're cold, we have a fire in our home or out in the wild, but we contain it. And if you look at, ancient fire management practices, part of the way they make sure a village and a whole forest doesn't burn down is doing small little burns. And so thinking of your anger work that way is you set aside a time and create containment both around other people. You're not doing anger work at someone. That's not anger work. That's
No.
exploding, it's throwing shit balls of feelings at your loved ones. But you create a time and a space where you can go inside, conjure up what you're pissed about. So maybe through writing, maybe through talking, and then try to physicalize the emotion in a way that keeps your body safe. So with
Mhm.
anger, you want to be more aware of body mechanics. And there are probably 20 suggestions of ways to do it in the book for anger. But it's about learning to explode. And it's also about, coming back to your grown up, resourced self before you make choices or have conversations. And so, before I get into the specifics of emotions, there's many chapters on how do you feel your feelings, and then also like how do you recover from that? Like what does the aftercare look like? How do you
Yeah.
get rid of it? And things like reality testing, which is another place I'm endorsing thinking, where you're asking, was it really true? And I can get into that. That's actually one of the most fascinating parts of my work, is that the overuse of trying to debunk our feelings is part of why everyone's walking around wounded still. It's like, for
Yeah,
instance,
please explain
yeah,
that more.
yeah. Let's say, the wound from your childhood was that you're not good enough, or, that you have to please everyone around you to be loved. At some point in your hip healing, awakening journey, you're like, that was from my mom and it's not true. And so then that feeling starts to come up in, let's say, a work meeting or on a date, and you're going to talk yourself out of it with that voice of, no, it's like, that wasn't my fault. It was my mom. Like that's like the best case scenario where you're trying to apply wisdom to talk yourself out of a feeling. Now, if you're in the middle of the work meeting or on the date, that's not time to shit your feelings on at your desk, right?
Right.
Or at the table. And so that's a good strategy. But ultimately, if that's the only thing you know to do, the wound is still in there festering. And so instead, we have to learn how do you to allow the feeling to move. The only way it's really going to come out is if the part of you that feels like a worthless piece of shit is given permission to feel that way as truth. And that's
Ah, yeah, 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 yeah.
I think that's like the key. I think the first talk I'm going to try to tour around to the therapeutic community is going to be this step I call becoming, which is you have to actually, at the crux of the emotional release, you have to become the part of you that feels like its worst case fear is true. Because, as kids, we were dismissed, we were talked out of our feelings, and it's alarmingly similar to that. Even if ultimately, at the biggest spiritual perspective, we are no more our feelings than we are our poop. There's something
Right.
that happens to us and through us. But in order to heal from them, we have to actually tell that part, tell me, baby. Yeah. And then the part's like, yeah, second nobody loves me. You're like, yeah. And so what that means, the way this came up is to come out of that so you don't stay stuck in that, which no one's going to because we're so defended. But that's when you do reality testing, where you're going to say, now, was it true that nobody loved you? Or was it true that, your mom was a drunk and wasn't showing you love the way you needed? Or, and I teach that in detail in the book too. But if you do that instead of having the feelings, the metaphor I use there is like if you're hiking in the woods, you cut yourself, are you going to wash out the cut if it's dirty before you stitch it up or bandage it? Or are you going to like try to bandage it with the dirt inside? And trying to talk ourselves, even from wisdom perspective, out of those feelings leaves the dirt inside.
Yeah, I hear you. I so hear you, Rachel. I appreciate those analogies, and the idea of becoming is almost like re-embodying
Yeah.
those parts of yourself, and and re-embodying those parts of ourselves that then have a chance to really be what they were meant to be, not
Yeah. Right.
what
And at
was
first,
suppressed.
what they're meant to be is they're upset, they're in pain, but I mean, the other piece is that there's an agency in this process. When you're choosing to turn toward your hard feelings and have them, there's this awareness part, right? And that's what the spiritual world will tell us we are. We are our awareness, we're the witness. True. And there is that part of us that's choosing to turn toward and move into and become the pain and release the pain and then recover. And so it's this beautiful, like, like connection or bridge, this weaving together of the part that wants to heal and that is choosing to be brave, and the part that has the most pain, you know. Um, and so there's this, it's like a healing relationship. In fact, I'm doing a TEDx talk right after the book comes out, maybe around when the listeners hear this, that is the most important relationship that heals people. It's between the resource grown part and the wounded part, less about the relationship between the client and the therapist. And so it is that weaving together of I'm choosing to do this. Now I am becoming, because you are that part. You do have that pain within you. It is you. You release from that place and then you recover.
So Rachel, and do you see with your clients, because you said agency, that in claiming that they are the authority of their own lives, that's a more uh, proactive place of living from?
Absolutely, 100%. And, and teaching them how to do this for themselves, how to be that resourced therapeutic bandwidth enhancement for themselves. When they come to see me, I am the Wi-Fi hotspot that amplifies their ability to connect to their pain. Because these big pains that we've been hiding from, they become so big, we need a really strong signal to feel them.
Yes. Yes.
But I want someone to learn how to do that for themselves. And actually, my first therapeutic training is in Gestalt therapy.
Oh,
And the basic, which I love, Gestalt therapy it's so like present based, body based, in the moment, not in story. But their notion of health is actually agency. It's feeling like you can meet your needs, you can move. The Gestalt is like in any moment, there's going to be a background and then a need emerges or a want, and you can follow it. Like, I'm thirsty, I'm going to have a sip of water, and then come back to this resting baseline. And so that what stops us from being able to have that agency is our disconnection from ourselves. So we get really close to our experience and then learn that we can meet our needs, and that creates a healthy person.
yes, I totally agree. So that's you just explained your I want to call it a slug line. That's not what it is on your book. Heal, feel, heal, and let that shit go. And then the small print is your guide to emotional resilience and lasting self-love. So you're basically through the book giving skill sets so that we can, once we've gotten over the big kabooms,
Right.
we can have sustainable
Yeah.
self-love and emotional health, because we're going to be moving through those emotions that, it no longer has to be about the childhood
No.
muck.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, one of my first favorite quotes that came about when I started my podcast, which is just another version of this work, is emotional resilience is the new happy. It's like
Yeah, I
knowing we
love
can
it.
handle all of our feelings enables
Uh-huh.
us to actually be ourselves and to go after our lives and to go after love and to go after, things where we might fail, because the thing we're really usually afraid of is our hard feelings about what happens. But when
Yeah.
and I only went into anger, I would like to, before we close, go into sadness also, just because Those are
Yes,
the basic
please.
energetic building blocks of all the feelings. But when you know that, okay, well, if I get mad, I can move it. If I'm scared, I can handle it. If I'm sad, I can grieve it. It's like knowing that really makes us feel like we can handle life, because there's no, when, and that's how I know someone's done with therapy. It's not that they're not going to have hard feelings. Of course they're going to have hard feelings. Their parents are going to die, their partners are going to die, who knows what's going to happen with our planet. Like, feelings, but they know how to handle them, so it's not a big deal. And the
Right.
self-love, really, that part I think comes more from the integration of these cast out parts, as we get woven back together, as we
Yeah.
allow these parts of us to come online, as we give care to ourselves, as we, even the space you're going to hold for your painful emotions shows those parts of you, the ones that were sure they're the problem, that they're lovable because you're giving yourself love. And so that's how you start to feel like, yeah, I might have some annoying things. I might not be for everyone, but I am worthy. I am lovable. I am valuable. And it's really unshakable because you're who you are. So
Yeah.
it's that wholeness and then the capacity to just feel the feels.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about sadness, because I know
Okay.
lots of people are actually grieving,
Yeah.
not necessarily because somebody died, but there's just this overwhelming sense of
Yeah.
grief that's
Yeah.
floating through the planet.
Yeah, and what I talk about in that chapter is like, and I had some teachers who taught this. There's a beautiful Indigenous teacher, Martine Prechtel, who has a book called On Grief and Praise, The Smell of Dust on Rain. But it's all about, grief being the other side of loss, or like the other side of love, rather. Grief is the flip side of praising, and so I think it's the cost of having a human heart. It's like you don't get to be here and be a person and not have loss sometimes. Or if you love, then you're going to lose. I mean, whether it's your keys, your job, your girlfriend, your life, your health. So it's vital that we know how to allow it, or else a few things happen. People get really, like you said, bitter, uh, sarcastic, edgy,
Yeah.
harsh, or people can get really addicted to bliss. Like, I think that, like, if you look at the polar opposite of grief, it's like this high. And so you see, people unable to slow down, or addicted to drugs, or addicted to concerts, addicted to the high. So grief, unlike anger, is something that really requires slowing down. And so you want to be a little mindful about when you do it in your day. So if you were to have a grief relief session, better in the morning or in the evening before you have caffeine. And it's really about creating a sense of containment or swaddling, where because if you think about little children, when they're sad, they want a hug, they want to be held. And so you can do that with your bed, with heavy blankets. You can do that in a bathtub, which is a really profound way to do it, because elementally,
Right.
grief connects to
Water.
water, right? We literally have salt water
Yeah.
coming to our face. So, being held in water, being held and contained, and then slowing down. And, grief is about the kind of the downward energy versus the upward energy. And so, you can put your hands on your chest, you can pet your head, you can play sad music, but you're trying to connect to the part of you that's sad and give it permission. Of course you're sad. That's a really good line to learn with yourself. Of course I'm scared. I'm allowed to be scared. Of course I'm sad. I'm going to give myself permission to be sad. And then as far as the techniques for sadness, I'd say the like lowest hanging fruit is like cat videos on the internet, or like kind of those sentimental things that we see, like, and it is okay to use media, but it's like as soon as you get the opening, let's say you're watching your favorite rom-com or your favorite little cute, man saves a dog from a river, whatever it is, once your heart starts to open up and you feel that tenderness or that feeling coming, you want to pause what you're doing and really go into, what are you sad about? Really take it into your own story. And with sadness, just like all rivers lead to the ocean, a little loss will touch on all of our losses. And so it's all really connected. And so another place where you don't want to be in your head and try to figure out why you're sad. Of course you're sad. You're living a temporary life. You've lost, you will continue to lose. We're living in perilous times as far as the planet goes. It's like you do not need a reason. You're sad, just like if you have to poop, you're not going to be like, but Is this a valuable, is this a valid poop? No, you're just going to go poop. So yeah, I think more than anything with sadness, it's about care.
Hmm.
and and sometimes some of the more generic skills for feeling your feelings, like becoming is one of those. It's an advanced one, but it's one of the ones you'd use with any feeling. um One of the skills that can be really helpful with sadness to learn is it's about conversing, or making the part of you that's sad, like envisioning it as a different part, either a kid, like maybe your inner child, like for your friend, or if you don't feel kind yet towards your inner child, which most people won't start off feeling that way, like who's your favorite outer child, or who's your favorite pet? So you can start to like talk to the sad part of you as if it's a different, you personify it and then talk to it. And then eventually that builds up the courage to then become as sad as you are. But it's a good doorway in. So it's really about containing and softening and letting flow, whereas the anger is much more about exploding. And then I will say that fear uses a bit of both. A good question
Hmm.
when you're scared is to ask yourself, do I want to run and freak out and get away, or am I frozen? And then if you're frozen, if you're in paralyzed or freeze, you want to treat it more like sadness and see if you can't find the helpless part and cry. If you're freaking out and jumping and jittery, then you want to treat it more frenetically like anger. And then shame, there's also a bit of both energetics. I think it's a little different where it's not like at any moment you do either, but more like, have you grieved yet how bad you feel about yourself? So in the beginning of shame work, as you start to touch that very deep layer, it's more about, feeling how sad and overwhelming and, you know, painful it is that you feel bad. And then eventually in the healing, I think it's about fighting back. I often say fighting the fuck back, including in the book, against the voice that told you you're not enough, And so
Yeah.
me, part of my final layers of healing with the dead boyfriend was like being like, fuck you for setting me up in this trap, and really finding my anger, which was very hard to find initially. But it's like saying, no, I'm not going to believe what you said to me, mom, or no, dad, you don't get to define my worth anymore. And you find that fire. And so it's a little more like anger work of you're fighting for your worth. But basically, if you know that up and out and the down, you're going to be able to like handle any feeling. And you're just trying to find what is the energetic that wants to happen, and then what's the best way. And as you get in there and explore with yourself, you'll find your ways. You'll have your, I put on Kenny Loggins to Return to Poop Corner when I need to cry with my little girl.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe hit a couch or a bed, or go get the axe, when it's time for anger, you find out what works for you. And it's really important that everyone do that you personalize it and you don't take my word for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to become self reliant and
Yeah.
resilient,
Yeah. And the
by
agency.
finding your own way to
Yes.
self express. I want to thank you, Rachel, for this conversation today. I might start crying. This is really
Beautiful.
yeah, thanks. Because every time I talk to an author, 9 times out of 10, I do this work because I'm learning. I'm a constant student and I'm learning, and I'm facing uh, a lifestyle change, a life transition currently. And you just said, of course you're scared. Of course I'm scared, because I'm
Yeah.
scared,
Yeah, of course you are.
and people around me are like, oh, but it's going to be so much better once you get through it. I'm like flipping
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
And nobody's going, well, of course you're scared. And you just gave me permission by saying, of course I'm scared. I'm just going
Absolutely.
to walk around to the rest of the day going, of course I'm scared, as I'm looking at all the
Yeah.
components I have to put together for this shift.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
You're so welcome. And just the more you let yourself be scared, well, really move that energy, the more you'll be able to handle this moment. And then each step will present itself. Like right now, you're scared about things probably many steps down the road. You
Yeah,
might not be who you are now when you reach those steps, but you are scared right now. And like as we pull our energy in to deal with fear,
right.
it's an easier path through wherever we're going. And, maybe it's not known yet. It's probably that's why you're scared is this is
Right,
unknown.
the unknown often freaks people out. It's, yeah, and it's the thing, life is for living, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes life is for getting through
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
going through, feeling our emotions, which we've
Yeah.
all, well, at least I want to say in America, it might be true all over the world where we are told to suppress and,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But the going through it with the emotions you're experiencing, as opposed to, putting them in that basement closet,
Yeah.
is so much healthier,
Yeah. Or
so much
telling yourself
healthier.
you're better off if you're not scared. Like, who decided that? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Oh my
ridiculous.
God. It's, you gotta say, you gotta feel what you feel in order to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rachel.
My
Rachel
pleasure.
Kaplan, the book is called Feel, Heal, and Let That Shit Go. You guys, let that shit go. Now's the time. This is absolutely the time
Yeah.
for all of us to let go of whatever the shit is that's keeping us all stuck in a modality that doesn't work anymore. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say that. Um, and Rachel, you've got a website. The website is the feelings with an S, feelingsmovement.com.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of things I offer there. I have a DIY course that will guide you through, like, if you like videos more than reading, kind of like the emotional potty training. There's all kinds of workshops that I've taught, and you can just definitely connect to my blog or the book, but just anything that I'm offering with people is there.
And once you do your TEDx talk, that'll be on your website too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Can't wait to hear that.
Thank you.
I'm so thrilled, and congratulations again. This is a huge body of work, and you guys heard how important it is.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for
Thank
all that you're doing, and I'm so grateful you're doing it at such a young age.
Well, thank you for thinking that.
Believe me, it's much better to do it early,
Yeah,
everybody.
it's great.
So I'm just going to say, finish with, and so it is, namaste.
Namaste.